And with that, I hand over to Mufrid for his session.
Thank you, Seb. Obviously, I should talk about first Lego League for next 15 minutes. Learning a foreign language is an amazing experience, especially that experience when you arrive in a foreign country and you're able to communicate with people who live there in their native language. So what about software? Shouldn't we be, me being a software guy, shouldn't I be able to experience the same when I meet my customers? I should be able to speak the business language, the domain language. So domain storytelling is a technique that helps us achieve that same amazing experience. I learned the domain language. As I mentioned, my name is Mufrid Krilic. I work as a software developer, a coach, a company called Dips in Norway. We develop enterprise software for healthcare. Been in the market for over 25 years, so I'll be drawing on some of that experience in my talk. So could we use the same principles from learning a foreign language when you learn a domain language? You could listen to people who are fluent in domain language, domain experts. You can repeat what they just said, and you get confirmation what you said was correct. So how does it work? It's a workshop. So you get to invite a development team, domain experts, and you need a facilitator. You ask the domain experts to explain how they work. And the first key thing is that you want that explanation to be centered around short examples. Examples are much easier to understand for a team that is not fluent in the domain, and you can also build up on drawing some generic patterns from those concrete examples. Then the facilitator, his or her job is to visualize each example. That visualization becomes a domain story. That by visualizing, we also help all the participants in the workshop to get involved. And it's also easier to get the confirmation from the domain expert whether or not you are correct in your domain story, because it's available for everybody to see. Then we try to check if everybody in the room agree. And even the small workshop, it's difficult for everybody to agree on the content and the semantics. So you just note the comments and deviations, the small textual annotations. So the mechanics of the domain storytelling is like this. You use a pictographic language, a set of icons. For instance, for actors in the system, it could be persons or a group of people or an existing software system. Those actors perform activities depicted as arrows on work objects. Work objects could be anything, documents passed to and from actors, emails, or even offline activities like phone calls. They are very domain specific. And of course, as mentioned, those textual annotations, you enrich each domain story with annotations about comments that participants make during the workshop. So any rules? Yes. Well, every game has rules, so does this one. We try to focus on what happens in the domain, not what could happen. So we try to avoid branching and alternative flows within a domain story. So if there is a significant alternative flow to the domain story being explained, you ask domain experts, okay, let's do another domain story. If there is a minor difference, then we do just a textual annotation. And if you're lucky enough to have several domain experts in the room, they could necessarily, or they don't necessarily agree on they conduct the business differently. So again, we use the same technique for noticeable differences, which create another domain stories, or we just mark a textual annotation. As this is each story is preferably a short example, we don't want actors to occur more than once in a story, while a work object can occur multiple times. Each activity is labeled in order which they occur. So those activities just get a number over the arrow, which is important because if you do that, then you're able to follow the story later on from the beginning to the end. And for us software developers, it's really important to avoid technical discussions during the domain storytelling workshop. The goal of the workshop is to learn the domain language. So those technical discussions could be postponed to different, to another later stage. Okay, so I'll try to do a demo here. And I'll use a use case from, as I mentioned, my company's background from healthcare. We did this the workshop last year. My team was charged with a new domain, new subdomain, group treatment. And another reason is I believe sometimes it's useful to get a non-trivial examples in presentations, and healthcare is a non-trivial, so it could be hopefully comparable to your domain. So a little bit about a group treatment in Norwegian hospitals. So you could imagine that we have a workshop here with domain experts. It happens when a patient with identical diagnosis, for some cases, the treatment is best done when they are in a group. It's often applied in psychiatry. So the basic flow is like this. A physician decides to start a group treatment for a group of patients. Well, the consultant and the hospital, they do administrative tasks, creating a patient group, laying out a schedule. For instance, you should meet every second Monday at 2 o'clock. So it's a recurrent schedule. And for each check-in, they register attendance, deal with no-show cancellations, follow up. And in some cases, if the whole appointment is cancelled, they have to notice patient that they don't need to attend. So let's see how this looks like. I try to put some dynamics here. Okay, so I'm not sure if everybody sees, but there are some screens there, so hopefully you'll be able to follow this. So we start, if you imagine the domain expert telling us this basic flow we just went through. So on the check-in process, the patients, which is actors, they check in at the venue. So we used an actor, a work object, an activity, and we label it. That's the first thing that happens. Then the domain experts, we ask them what happens next. Okay, so the consultant says, okay, then I have a manually compiled patient list, and I verify using that list which patients have checked in. Because in a group of 5 patients, okay, this time only 4 of them actually showed up. Okay, so what happens next? Well, okay, then I have to record the patient visit in the patient record system. And then some questions start popping up in the workshop, like, okay, what happens for those patients who didn't show up? It shouldn't be a whole different story. Well, it actually turns out that we record the patient visit, but just with a special flag that they should get a fee because they didn't show up. What about those who did cancel a week before? Well, it's not much different. We just have to use proper cancellation codes, but they don't get the fee. But then it turns out that this recording is based on the same manually compiled patient list, and it happens the day after. So during the workshop, we find out possibly the important piece of information that these 2 activities are separated in time. Okay, what happens next? Then we go the next stage, and the physician has to approve this. in the patient record system. And after that, the patients get billed with an invoice. This is it. Actually quite simple, relatively non-trivial example. Should be able to follow from the beginning to the end. Should be relatively easy to understand for the participants in the workshop. And we carry on with more of examples like this, building the domain knowledge. And the language here it's all about domain language. So the terms here is what constitutes domain language, and the team gets a head start in naming things, if you'd like to say. So there is not much else to say about domain storytelling. The other techniques that methods that help you learn domain language. Two of my favorites, in addition to domain storytelling, event storming. I believe there's a workshop tomorrow on event storming. That should be interesting. And example mapping. And impact mapping is also one of techniques that we have used. Often I get the question about differences between event storming and domain storytelling. Well, I guess the details of event storming will be covered in the workshop tomorrow. But just to scratch it a little bit, scratch the surface, event storming is really good at exposing time as a first-class citizen of the model or of the domain. So if you're interested in plotting the timeline, event storming is really a powerful tool. It's also very explorative, meaning if you are dealing with chaotic domains, or if domain experts are actually unsure how the business works, event storming could really draw a big picture fairly quickly and give you an excellent start. On the other hand, domain storytelling, hopefully, as you could see on the demo, shows you how systems and people work together. And if your domain experts are able to articulate how they work, then domain storytelling is a tool of the choice. Of course, this is about choosing the right tool for the job. So, but it's useful to know several techniques. Okay, so let's wrap up. Domain storytelling is actually quite an old technique, as far as I could understand. But it was presented by Stefan Hofer and Henning Schwettner a couple of years ago to domain-driven design community. And that's where actually I picked it up, and I believe it was first a couple of years ago. It was presented to a wider audience. There's also a very nice website which goes into more details to several of the things I talked about. We are building community on Slack, and apparently there is a book coming. As you see from this tweet, Henning and Stefan are more than happy to be reminded constantly that we are expecting a book. So feel free to drop them a tweet and push, hopefully, the release date forward. Thank you.